I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. Our guest today is Dr. Ray O'Neill, presenting his paper, Double Double, Toil and Trouble, Psychoanalysis Burn and Surrealism Bubble.
Because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I am not worth the dust and the feet of them that hang, how may I live without my name? I have given you my soul, leave me my name. Within Arthur Miller's The Crucible, the occult, hysteria, madness and sexuality are mobilised into this frenetic climax in Act 4, where John Proctor, having already acknowledged himself as an adulterer and perjured himself in confessing to witchcraft, his reputation ruined and his soul lost, is unable to sign the confession as there is one thing he wishes to salvage: his name. The most common answer to the basic existential question, who am I, is with a name. I may be introduced to you in a variety of ways, but ultimately I am presented and presenting as Ray. This is who I am because it is my name. But this is not my name. This is my parents' name for me. And to be fair, they originally did christen me Raymond, after my father's second name. Our names are never our own. They come with legacies, desires, significations, and ghosts. My brief time working in Zimbabwe last month soon shattered any previous witness of deprivation and poverty I had until that point. But when I'd heard that a very starved, ill, heavily pregnant woman had given birth to a boy that she had named in Shona language Hard Life, I was shocked and disturbed, though throughout my time I was meeting people who carried either English or Shona names that were blessing, fortune, last one, faith. There was even a woman who named her daughter Apology. I didn't ask her why. Something is signified in names, and though what modern Western culture may be inclining towards a naming that mirrors trends in celebrity personae or their children, is there not still a desire within such parents for their children or themselves that they will share in the glamour of being a Paris or a Northwest or a Chardonnay? Shona namings do not seem so strange against Gaelic Irish language names such as Bronach, which literally means sadness or grief, Saoirse, meaning freedom or liberty, or Grania, relating to either love, gra, or Grana, meaning ugliness. Considering the name Cian is a Gaelic word for longing and melancholy, chuinach, from which the English word keening evolves, suddenly Hard Life doesn't seem so odd a name. The name we are, that primary signifier through which we identify, comes with other desires and significations that, as with all language, we are born into and immersed in throughout our lives. We are named after someone or something, and with those someones and somethings comes something more, something both seen and unseen, familiar and unknown, an occultist legacy, an unheimlich naming, a homo doubling. I'm thinking of a client I will name Joseph, who suffered from an anxious depression, which was intensified for him, as within our cause and effect culture, he had never understood why he was depressed, since he had no trauma in his life. Only in the course of his analysis did he mention his being named Joseph after a younger brother of his mother's who had died before he was born. Subsequent questioning he did of his mother only produced a very limited, reluctant story, in true Irish family style, that this beloved 24-year-old brother had drowned in a bath at home while his mother was pregnant with our Joseph. This possible suicide and Uncle Joseph's struggles with his own life were silenced and repressed within the family, but understanding something of the ghosts he had inherited in his name allowed Joseph to speak differently of his depression, of it not only being his, that in analytically responding to it, he was absolved in some way from the full weight of its responsibility. I think of another clinical case file of a man that I shall call Owen Murphy, who had been incarcerated most of his life in a rural Irish psychiatric institution for schizophrenia and multiple personalities. But when a psychiatrist who had been psychoanalytically informed began working with him, he noted that Owen's suffering centred more around not knowing which he was rather than who he was. Further conversations revealed that Owen was the youngest of 9 brothers, all of whom who had died in birth or very early infancy, and all of whom had been called Owen Murphy. Such had been his father's desire and determination to have a son who bore his name, that this Owen carried the burden of 8 lost lives, desires, anxieties. Owen, in English, means nobly born. Similarly, in Eugene O'Neill's autobiographical Long Day's Journey into Night, the protagonist Edmund, Eugene's counterpart, is named after Eugene's older brother who had died in infancy and whose death catalyses the family traumas, resentments, griefs and fears around which the play lingers. And in the play, when the dead baby is spoken of, this dead brother that Eugene was born to replace is rechristened by the playwright as Eugene, this which ironically is the anglicisation of Owen, noble born. All names and namings carry ghosts of the past and present desires. For each of our namings there is a doppelganger, a homo double from whom that name has been stolen, inherited, pushed, be it an actual person or a desired personal identity, of which my Rayness can only ever be but an echo, a copy, a facsimile, a reproduction. 1922's first Spanish translation of the Interpretation of Dreams kindled Salvador Dali into a fanatical Freudian enthusiast. Reading of Freud's Flee from the Nazis, Dali wrote to Zweig, who arranged a meeting on July 19, 1938. Dali described this meeting as one of his life's most important experiences, forcing him to reconsider his whole view of surrealism. The painting he presented to Freud, Metamorphosis of Narcissus, signifies something Dali wanted to communicate to Freud, about psychoanalysis, and most importantly, perhaps, about Dali's desire vis-a-vis Freud himself. Dali is, of course, aware not only of the metamorphosis of Narcissus by psychoanalytic discourse, but how psychoanalysis metamorphosizes discourse around sexuality, desire, libido, and paranoia. For Dali, psychoanalysis' recognition of the double was critical not only for his art, but for his inherently doubled self. Dali acknowledged surrealism as the only adequate outlet for activity, criticising surrealist practices such as automatic writing as genuinely passive, advocating his own more active, paranoid, critical method of interpretation, fashioned after the paranoid patient's unwavering personal system of interpreting reality, which structures them alone uniquely. Dali recognised paranoia as an alternative parallel mental processing, closer to paranoid's original Greek meaning of parallel mind. Dali and Freud both reject psychiatry's definition or dismissal of paranoia as madness, or irrational, or socially unacceptable. In his Schreber case, Freud discoursed paranoia as the unconscious structuring, the interpretation of perceived objects through projecting onto the external world unconscious, undesirable fantasies. In analysing Schreber's own words, Freud argues paranoia not as an illness as such, but actually an attempt at recovery, a parallel thinking, evidencing an attempt by the paranoid ego to reconnect to reality through its integration with a fictional world. Freud's psychoanalytic theorizations on homosexuality consistently located narcissism in its primary roots, but in his last major contribution to this subject, 1922's Some Neurotic Mechanisms in Jealousy, Paranoia and Homosexuality, Freud elaborates, "I never regarded this analysis of the origin of homosexuality as complete. I now point to a new mechanism leading to homosexual object choice, which was the operation of paranoia in neurotic homosexuality, a form of homosexuality that Freud argued didn't need to be exclusive, as later heterosexual objects were quite possible. This theory differs significantly from other homosexual theories Freud had developed in involving neither identification with the mother nor a fear of female genitals caused by castration anxiety. It begins with an intense love of the mother, which leads to a jealousy of great intensity towards rivals, brothers, and the father that mobilizes hostility and death wishes towards them. But these impulses yielded to repression and underwent transformation into first homosexual love objects. Freud sees such defense-reaction formations as the inverse of the process by which passive homosexual love is transformed into persecutory or delusional paranoia. In this latter case, as explored in Schreber, the unbearable homosexual impulse that I love him is transformed into negation, into I hate him, and then rationalized through projection into he hates me. So it's paranoia that keeps the subject from becoming homosexual. The Metamorphosis of Narcissus doubles not only the figure of Narcissus on the left, looking at this reflection in the body of water, with the image of an outreaching hand holding an egg from which a narcissus flower is emerging, but Dalí's very canvas was also doubled with a poem written to accompany his painting. Like, mirroring like, language augmenting art, signifiers doubling the image. This was the first work that Dalí ascribed as being painted in his paranoid critical methodology. Dalí's accompanying poem explicitly calls the group of people in the mid-space between the dual narcissi as the heterosexuals. The narcissus figure is significantly described as far from the heterosexuals, marginalized, excluded, different. Why would he choose this signifier heterosexual in opposition to the narcissi? In the doubling poem, Dalí describes the body of water where Narcissus leans as the obscure mirror of the lake, in which his own body, quote, fixes itself, frozen in the silvered and hypnotic curve of his desire. It is within this mirrored, obscured desire that, quote, Narcissus loses his being in the cosmic vertigo in the deepest depths of his own image. Within this mirroring, quote, the body of Narcissus flows out and loses itself in the abyss of his reflection. Dalí warns Narcissus, you are losing your body, carried away and confounded by the millinery reflection of your disappearance, your body stricken dead, your white body swallowed up. This notion of Narcissus mirroring as the location where the body is seen and lost, where the price of confronting desire is loss, the mirror as a place where we find ourselves only to be metamorphosed into a being alienated, lost, dead, swallowed up. All of this doubling prefigures some of the dynamics and movements of Lacan's mirror stage, the original version of which was delivered at Marienbad in 1936, the very year Dalí began this painting. 1936 was also the year when Lorca, Dalí's great friend and fellow artist and love, was assassinated by right-wing nationalists. They had met when they were much younger at the Residencia de Estudiantes, and theirs was an intense, passionate relationship, construed by Dalí, must say later on, as Lorca was homosexual, as everybody knows, and madly in love with me. He tried to screw me twice. I was extremely annoyed because I wasn't homosexual, and I wasn't interested in giving in. Besides, it hurts. So nothing came of it. But I felt awfully flattered vis-a-vis the prestige. Deep down, I felt that he was a great poet, and I did owe him a tiny bit of the divine Dalí's asshole. He eventually bagged a young girl, and she replaced me in that sacrifice. Failing to get me to put my ass at his disposal, he swore that the girl's sacrifice was matched by my own. It was the first time he had ever slept with a woman. Soon after they became estranged, after their studies, though the fear and discomfort around their feelings for one another that they both struggled with differently. Dalí was, quote, obsessed by Lorca, but troubled by this obsession, referring to both himself and Lorca as Saint Sebastians throughout his letters to Lorca. In one such letter, remarking, "Didn't you ever think how strange it is that Sebastian's ass doesn't have one single wound?" Before finishing with his usual, "I love you very much." Whatever the nature of their relationship, Dali's 1969 comments interestingly identify Lorca as homosexual while refuting Dali's own desire, though significantly he uses the past and not the present tense, because I wasn't homosexual. He arrogantly is flattered by Lorca's attention, but ominously again associates this or his or homosexual desire with anal sex, but with Lorca as the penetrator, himself as the recipient. However their sexuality was or was not enacted, Dali significantly perceives his own desire vis-a-vis Lorca's as a giving in, and seems to have an awareness that this desire demands painful sacrifice. Dali references the event where Lorca bagged a young girl. Dali himself was present for this scene, voyeuristically watching Lorca's first sexual act with a woman. Dali views the object of his desire sacrifice himself to the heterosexuals. Again, there is a doubling, both participating, one actively, the other narcissistically, both bound in the desire of the other. Another defining homo relationship of Dali's was his relationship to his own older brother, also named Salvador Dali, who had died of gastroenteritis 2 months before the young boy had turned 2, and 9 months before Dali was born. In other words, Dali was conceived in his parents' grief at the loss of their firstborn son. His brother's loss was his own conception. His brother's name, memory, and identity waited for him at his birth. He was given his dead brother's name, his dead brother's clothes to wear, and his dead brother's toys to play with. And when he was 5, Dali was brought to his brother's grave to be told by his parents that he was, in fact, his brother's reincarnation. Something that Dali came to believe and actually incorporate, saying of his brother, "We resembled each other like 2 drops of water. We had different reflections. He was probably a first version of myself, but conceived too much in the absolute." This, written in 1942 after his Metamorphosis of Narcissus, evokes his brother in water, in reflections, in the mirror. The mirror image identity of Dali's long-dead brother repeatedly reappeared embedded throughout his work, most ominously in 1963's Portrait of My Dead Brother. Painted when Dali was 59, the image is clearly not of a 2-year-old, but a much older boy, whose hair morphs into a crow, a harbinger of death. I should have said harbinger of death in that moment. Dali continually spoke of his challenge in establishing his own identity to free himself from his parents' inevitable and persistent comparisons with the deceased and thus idealized sibling. Dali continually asserted his parents' desire for him to be a replacement for his dead brother. He was a spectre which affected, indeed threatened him, compelling him to cultivate his eccentric behaviour, his dandyism, in order to establish, indeed prove that he was different from the first, perhaps better loved version of Salvador Dali. The group of lance-bearing conquistadores in the bottom right of the painting could evolve Dali's desire to dispel and vanquish his brother's enduring memory that continued to overshadow him. The double, the mirror, is a threat. Dali maintains himself in being or performing or becoming such a highly unique, original. And part of maintaining his self is killing his brother. And this is performed through his dandyism, which culturally has its own discursive alignments with sameness, homoness, narcissism and homosexuality. In the lower left of Dali's painting is a variation of Millet's famous The Angelus, which long obsessed Dali. From his childhood daydreaming at primary school, where the Angelus hung on the wall, and staring at it, he would invent stories about this couple. A fantasy was continually repeated throughout this oeuvre as an adult. Dali believed that Millet had originally painted the couple bowing over the coffin of their dead child, rather than they are seen in the finished version praying over a basket of a potato crop. Although this was a hugely unpopular view, at Dali's insistence, the Louvre x-rayed the painting and indeed revealed a small coffin had been overpainted by the basket. Dali's 1930 essay, The Rotting Donkey, outlined his paranoid critical method of interpretation, arguing that paranoia makes use of the external world in order to set off an obsessive idea, utilising it to control an imaginative construction, an alternative double, another knowledge. The image Dali offers to demonstrate and frame his paranoid double was his invisible sleeping woman, horse, lion. A woman which is unconsciously associated with and accommodating the image of a lion, which in turn is unconsciously associated with and accommodating the image of a horse. Together, contradictory things are seen, multiple and parallel realities, each legitimate, a logical alternative, another possibility, deconstructing the concept of one, or indeed any reality. This Dali related to the paranoid employment of the reality of the external world as an illustration of proof of the obsessive idea, with the disturbing characteristic of verifying this idea for others. Dali identified the Metamorphosis of Narcissus as his first poem and first painting, obtained entirely through the integral application of the paranoid critical method. A discursive circle of narcissism, doubling homo with heterosexuals and paranoia to inform a painting conceived in the year Dali's beloved dies by an artist conceived in the wake of his brother's death, bearing his name, his likeness, his homoness, as Lacan delivers his theory of the mirror stage at Marienbad. This is from Dali himself. When Romoguer read me his thesis for the first time in my life, amid incomparable thrills, I felt the absolute truth. A psychoanalytical thesis revealed the sensational conflict at the basis of my tragic structure, the ineluctable presence deep within me of my dead brother, whom my parents had been so fond of that when I was born they gave me the name Salvador. This thesis Dali refers to was not the first psychoanalytically informed thesis to impact on Dali, nor indeed to have settled a question from him, especially around the doubling from a predeceased sibling from whom one has inherited their name, but more treacherously their legacy, their fantasy, their identity. It could be argued that before Lacan was a psychoanalyst, he was a surrealist, being friendly with Breton, Duchamp, Picasso, Masson. Lacan was a long-time collector of art and borrowed from the visual arts to explain his theories. In his 20s, training as a psychiatrist and researching his doctorate, Lacan also found time to write for the Surrealist Minotaur magazine, and it was here his writings were to meet Dali's. In 1932, having just translated the earlier mentioned Freud's 1922 paper on some neurotic mechanisms in jealousy, paranoia and homosexuality for the Revue Française de Psychoanalyse, referring to this paper, Lacan does in his 1933 doctoral thesis, which Dali later then cites in 1933 in Minotaur's first issue as Jacques Lacan's admirable thesis, praising Lacan's identification of the paranoid mechanism as the force and power acting at the very root of the phenomenon of personality. Lacan took huge pride in Dali's words. His decree describes his doctorate as merely an introduction to paranoid knowledge, and references Dali's own paranoid critical methods. From the outset of his publishing career, Lacan evidenced an interest in paranoid psychosis. It was encountering Marguerite, a 38-year-old woman, which enabled him to demonstrate his views on paranoia, specifically the paranoia of self-punishment. Another likely motive for his choice was the great public interest in Marguerite's knife attack against the famous actress Huguette Duflo, which took place outside a Parisian theatre in April 1931. The widespread sensation was not lost on the surrealists, especially as Marguerite had unreasonably accused the actress of persecution and of spreading scandalous rumours about her. These crimes frequently, Lacan says, though not always, contained elements of the late 19th century obsession with the doppelganger, the psychic double. Lacan utilised Freudian paranoia theories to address Marguerite's case, whom he renamed Amie, after the heroine of one of her novels, diagnosing her sufferings as a delirium of interpretation against paranoiac's psychical functions of representation, not as false meanings, but as personal meanings. In Paranoid Delusion, Lacan diagnosed a key conceptual structure is an iterative identification, evidenced in Amy's case in her repeated identification with successful women who ultimately persecute her. In terms of Lacan's psychoanalytic reading, Amy's identifications were identifications with her ego ideal, the ideal that the ego aspires to. For what lies at the heart of paranoia self-punishment, the object of Lacan's thesis, as well as the paranoid delirium that it generates, was the fact that the paranoid patient engaged in attacking her doubles, her mirror images, the woman she identified with, realizing in some way a wish to punish herself. Lacan's thesis analysed the distinctive character of Amy's female persecutors, her older sister, her female friends, the attacked, as purely symbolic significance, interpreting these persecutory women as the double, the triple, or successive printings, but of an original prototype. Lacan's thesis hinged on his recognition of the importance of doubling effects. Dali, like Marguerite and Amy, was born into a mould, a desire, a name of a deceased older sibling whose ghost was there at the start to welcome me. So one of the things that Lacan realised in speaking with Amy was that actually she had inherited her name Marguerite from an older sister who had died. Dali's paranoid, critical, interpretive approach exemplifies the madness which threatens those of us born double. All of us are born into the homo desire of a same-named personage, which binds us all, consciously or unconsciously, within such homo desires. In our names, we are all born into a doubling of whatever this name signifies, passes on, bequests. We all suffer from a paranoid knowledge that our names, who we are, is not ours. That our names, our primary identification of ourselves, indicate desires that are not our own, but are bound, homily, to a nominal doppelganger. And as Freud says, wo es war, soll ich werden. Where it was, I am to become. In Freud's On Narcissism, the ego is divided with one part set against the other as judge and critic. The ego carries within itself its own ideal, a homo perfection. Freud names as the ideal ego or ego ideal. And this homo ideal can be equally loved or hated, desired or feared, evidenced in Lacan's doctoral thesis, where the same image representing Amy's ideal is also the object of her hatred. Such a foundational, if indeed ambiguous, relationship to an ego ideal is precisely what informs Lacan's mirror stage. Despite our contemporary hyper-narcissistic culture, where everybody is selfied, I mean selfish, enthralled in our own image, yet still the doppelganger continues to be portrayed as an ominous threat, an intrusive menace, the anxiety-provoking Mr. Hyde shadow, the Dostoevskian double that seeks to usurp one's life. The doppelganger must be fought, killed, or else one will die. Why, if we want to love ourselves so Facebookingly, do we fear and dread this encounter with the original of ourselves? In Scandinavian folklore, the Valdur, if I'm pronouncing it right, is a spirit predecessor, where a spirit with the subject's appearance precedes them in locations or activities, resulting in witnesses believing they've seen or heard that person before the person actually arrives. It is a harbinger of luck, fortune, and foresight. But in matters of desire, a desire for same is still feared and repressed within our culture. Anything homo is to be feared, belittled, marginalised, seen as a threat. And is not the doppelganger our ultimate homo? A double in image or in name with whom we can encounter something truly unheimlich about ourselves, something that is strangely familiar and yet unsettling, evocative, provocative, something by which we are simultaneously attracted and yet repulsed. Any discourses, be it psychoanalysis, art, or the occult, that encourages an authentic, non-narcissistic encounter with the depths of ourselves is always to be encouraged, but only through practitioners that do not seek mirrors of themselves or their theories or their desires in their clients, but practitioners who can act as mediums, witnesses for their clients' truest encounters, which is never with the practitioner, but with the truth of their own experiences. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard Dr. Ray O'Neill. This paper was presented at the Psychoanalysis, Art, and the Occult Conference held at Candid Arts Trust in London in May of 2016. To read collected papers from this conference, please visit our publisher's website, trapart.net. That's TRAPART.net. Dr. Ray O'Neill is a psychoanalyst based in Dublin, Ireland. He'll be in New York in June from the 14th through the 17th at the conference for the International Association for Relational Psychoanalysis and Psychotherapy, presenting a paper called Breeding Lilacs Out of the Dead Land, addressing mourning and loss of Gaelic Ireland. For more information about Dr. O'Neill, Rendering Unconscious, or myself, please visit our website, renderingunconscious.org, or my website, drvanessasinclair.net. Thanks.
Behind and in front, see the eye of our consciousness as a fictional assembly or collage that resides in the will, and the practice of this repeated ritual has a cumulative effect.
Let go.
Of the time I'm in exists
think,
between consciousness
fast,
and matter,
wait,
the ego
think,
and the real of the body,
fast, wait,
perception
walk,
and will
let
be
go,
once again
fade to
the
indifference,
unconscious.
dearest you.
There is also
Here
destiny,
are a few.
European
Others too.
academic tradition,
What can
and
we
made
do
them aware of their
while
personal
embracing
genius,
new ways of thinking,
influenced a
utilizing
frame
new
of
materials and
reference,
methods?
categories.
Stew called
In fact,
Vindaloo,
the cut-up method
the love
is a
that
priceless
grew
tool
without
in
taboo,
accessing the depths
a witch's
of
brew,
thee,
and
a
hot
frame of an
voodoo.
image,
Question
possibility
society's
of a
accepted
seamless
values
identity,
and consensus
sexual or
worldview,
otherwise.
challenging
Psychoanalysis
assumed
views
power
identity
focus,
as that
invoke a
has
boogaboo
yet to be created.
and not feel blue, because it's
Conceptualization
true,
of the subject as
as in
divided,
reopening a gap,
conscious
creating space
unconscious,
that we may utilize to
undermines the
reprogram
yet to
ourselves,
be interpreted,
inventing.
screening, sub-umbra at the
I would
symposium
travel
we are
everywhere.
hosting together.
You also knew
Psychoanalysis,
how our spirits accrue.
art, and the occult,
We need to screw.
yet to be torn
Consider
apart
where that
minds,
particular idea of theirs
cutting
came
one
from.
piece out of its
If I
prescribed
could travel
position
anywhere,
and reanimating
elements
it in a
into
new
his
way,
work, narrative,
to be fully
so
integrated,
as Alain Badiou
giving it new life.
states, persevere
When we take the
in the
time
interruption,
out to perform a ritual
sensitive
or
to
attend the
influence
next art and
by the
spirit,
machine of New York
fodder
City.
for the soul's
Picabia then
revelation,
began to incorporate
language,
more industrial,
the cut-ups of the
cerebral
Dadas,
membrane
Brian Geisen and William S.
across long
Burroughs,
distances.
but these
Letters,
revealing one's own
postcards,
strengths.
journals, and magazines
Artists also cut up
not only
tapes,
provided,
sounds,
and we all share the same
images,
daily narrative.
photographs, and
The
eventually
space
thoughts,
created
concepts,
creates space,
and others'
so when we
weaknesses.
re-enter the scene, returning,
A series of overlays,
it really is playback
cuts,
time.
and intersections.
Movement was notably
Really,
diffuse,
all films do
with
this
several
through
active
the
city
process
centers
of
creating a
stand
network
fast in the
of
experience of
ultimatums,
oneself
promises, or
and the
fulfillments
image in the
to
mirror.
the day-to-day.
This
We
experience of
created room
disconnect,
for something new to
quagmire of
transpire,
opinions,
a cut, a
analytic
slice,
session. When we
containing no
exit our
regrets,
daily program,
physical and
we're
behavioral
cutting ourselves
identity.
out of
The
our
body is used by the
branch to
mind
grasp
as a
for,
logo for the self,
A cultural pioneer,
a particular
Carl
vision,
Abrahamson,
environment
has
of the
recently
body.
released two
One of the
related
central
films
themes of our
on
work
trap art.
is the malleability
Only grows from the
of
hearts,
make me do what you
continues
see,
throughout life.
upbringing,
This process
parents,
of
social
identification
conditioning,
is similar
societal
to that of
standards. This
identification
act creates
of the very
room
real
for our
imaginists
make me see what
with
you
the
do,
mother.
ourselves,
Only this
the
time
way we wish to
identification
be,
occurs
rather than the way
with
we're
one's
destined to be,
own mirror image.
based on the
Be those
Dadas
with
made
integrated
use of new
editing.
media
But
that
in this
allowed for
creative
contact
work,
between
the latent
persons
process is made
start
manifest.
over,
Uncanny
also
images
creates the
morph.
gap, space, in which something new
Psychogeometrical
can grow,
designs
just the way
calls
ritual
the subject
cuts us,
is not
and
equivalent
actually
to
can
the
do,
ego
out
identity,
of our
but
day-to-day
rather is
narrative,
situated in the gap.
creating room
That
for us to
are
imagine a new
theirs,
reality.
and theirs alone.
All one has to do,
Not the sext.
achievement,
It is
lay in
essentially
its ability
perverse,
to create a global
infantile
network
sexuality,
of artists and
which is our
intellectuals,
unconscious,
from babies' minds
alone,
into surreal
before
and
we are
haunting
able to speak
scenescapes.
language.
The experience
Only time will
escapes
tell
words.
important means
Abrahamson
of
will
sharing
be,
ideas
all
and images,
footprints are
but were
eventually
also
erased.
incorporated into new
Dreams
forms.
and the violation of syntax
Only
as
history will
techniques for
judge
freeing the
method
unconscious
and mode of creating,
from the only
viewing
history
and
will
experiencing
judge.
artwork, valuing
Method and mode of
cacophony.
creating,
All
viewing and
footprints are
experiencing
eventually
artwork,
erased.
valuing cacophony.
Dreams and the violation
Only
of
time will
syntax
tell.
as techniques for freeing
Important
the
means
unconscious
of sharing
from
ideas and images,
from babies'
but
minds
we're also incorporated
into
into new
surreal and
forms
haunting
alone
scenescapes.
before we are able
The
to speak
experience
language
escapes
that are
words.
theirs and theirs alone, not the sext.
Abrahamson
It is
will
essentially
be
perverse infantile
all
sexuality,
one has to do.
which is our
Achievement
unconscious.
lay in its ability to create
Psychogeometrical
a global
designs
network
calls
of
the
artists and
subject
intellectuals,
is not equivalent to
and
the
actually
ego
can
identity,
do
but
out of
rather
our
is
day-to-day
situated in the
narrative,
gap that
creating
those
room
with
for us
integrated
to imagine
editing.
a new
But in
reality.
this creative work, a
Is start
latent
over
process is made
also
manifest.
creates the gap,
Uncanny
space
images
in which
morph
something new
of the
can
very
grow.
real imaginists
Just the way ritual cuts
with
us,
another.
the Dadas made use
Only
of new
this
media
time,
that allowed for
identification
contact
occurs
between
with one's own
persons.
mirror image.
Make me see what
The
you
only
do,
grows from the heart,
ourselves the way we wish to be,
continues throughout life.
rather than the way we're
This
destined to be
process of
based on
identification is
our.
similar to that of
Make me
identification,
do what
a
you
branch
see,
to grasp for.
upbringing,
A cultural pioneer,
parents,
Carl
social
Abrahamson,
conditioning,
has recently
societal
two
standards.
related
This act
films
creates room for
released on
our,
trap
a
art,
particular vision, environment
quagmire
of the body.
opinions,
One of the
analytic
central
session.
themes of our
When we
work
exit
is
our
the
daily
malleability
program,
of
we're cutting
containing
ourselves
no
out
regrets,
of our
physical and
standfast
behavioral
in the
identity.
experience of
The
oneself
body is
and the
used by the
image in the
mind
mirror.
as a logo for the
This
self.
experience of disconnect
Ultimatums,
and others'
promises, or
weaknesses,
fulfillment
a series of
to the
overlays,
day-to-day.
cuts, and
We've created
intersections.
room for something
Really,
new to
all films
transpire.
do this through the
A
process
cut,
of revealing
a
one's own
slice
strengths.
is really
Artists also
is
cut up
playback
tapes,
time.
sounds, images,
Movement
photographs,
was notably
and
diffuse,
eventually thoughts,
with several active
concepts,
city centers,
fodder
creating
for
a
the
network
soul's
of,
revelation,
and we all share the
language.
same
The
daily
cut-ups
narrative.
of the Dadas, Brian
The
Geisen
space
and
created
William S.
creates
Burroughs,
space, so
but
when we
these,
re-enter the
art
scene,
and spirit,
returning cerebral
to be fully
membrane
integrated,
across long
giving it new
distances,
life.
letters,
When we take the time out to
postcards,
perform a ritual
journals, and
or
magazines,
attend the
not only
next,
provided
yet to be
sensitive
torn
to
apart,
influence
minds,
by the machine of New York
cutting
City.
one piece out of its
The
prescribed
cavia then
position
began to
and
incorporate more
reanimating it in a
industrial,
new way,
if I could travel
yet to
anywhere,
be interpreted.
elements into his work,
Screening sub
narrative.
umbra at the
So as
symposium we were
Lampadou
hosting together,
states,
Psychoanalysis,
persevere in
art
the
on the
interruption.
occult, that
I
has
would
yet
travel
to be
everywhere.
created.
You also knew how our
Conceptualization of the
spirits
subject
accrue.
as divided,
We need to
conscious,
screw.
unconscious, undermines
Consider where that
the
particular
a
idea of
frame
theirs came
of an
from.
image,
Assume
possibility
power,
of a seamless
focus,
identity,
invoke a
sexual or
bugaboo,
otherwise.
and not feel
Psychoanalysis
blue,
views identity as a frame
because
of
it's
reference, categories.
as in the
fact,
opening a gap,
the cut-up method is a priceless
creating
tool
space
in accessing the
that we may
depths
utilize to
of the
reprogram ourselves,
there is also
inventing
destiny.
stew called vindaloo,
European
that love
academic
brew
tradition, and made them aware
without
their
taboo,
personal genius
a witch's
influenced
brew
and will
and
be
hot
once
hoodoo
again the unconscious
question
of
society's
the time
accepted values
I'm in
and consensus
exists
worldview,
between consciousness and matter,
challenging
the ego and the
fade to
real of the body,
indifference.
perception
Dearest
and
you,
behind
here
and
are
in
a
front.
few
See
of us
the
too.
eye of our consciousness as a
What can we
fictional
do?
assembly or collage that resides
While
in
embracing
the
new
will,
ways of
and
thinking,
the practice of this
utilizing
repeated
new materials
ritual
and
has
methods.
a cumulative effect.
Let go. Walk. Think. Fast. Wait. Think fast. Wait. Walk. Let go.